In the video today, we are answering a viewer question because Jeremy R asks us, who were the richest people in history? Wealth transcends time. It is also extremely hard to evaluate. There have been more than a few studies and lists that have tried to figure out who the richest people of all time are. This task has been proven to be nearly impossible, though. Accurately adjusting for inflation is, of course, one obstacle. It is very hard to account for what made up wealth throughout history in terms of valuing goods and the like, and what was used as currency has also varied throughout time, with valuing that presenting its own difficulties. Additionally, records and accounting have been lost. What we have to go on to determine who the wealthiest people are from hundreds of years ago are stories, legends, and other such written accounts. That being said, the question was asked, and we aim to please, so this here is our best attempt at a richest person list. We chose to organize it by century, dating back to the 11th century, as much accuracy any further back becomes a bit of an effort in futility, not only accounting for the lack of good records, but also when attempting to adjust the currency amounts to modern values, as we have done. Also, do note that we took the liberty of associating the person with the century where they were at the height of their wealth, since many people lived during 2 centuries. Feel free to quibble about all of that in the comments below. Any alternative suggestions would also be interesting in case we missed something in our research. But without further ado, let's get into it. Now let's start with the 11th century. William the Conqueror, worth approximately $230 billion in today's dollars. There is some thought that due to the vast natural resources and the power over the gold trade at the time, that King Tenkamenin of Ghana should be considered the richest man of the 11th century. However, when looking into it further, it seems there is more legend associated with this than anything else, so we'll go with the more concrete choice of William the Conqueror, the Norman King of England. He earned his wealth the old-fashioned way, by pillaging. When he was king, he also built many enormous castles across England, several of which still stand today. Moving on to the 12th century, Genghis Khan, his worth is a bit unknown. Due to incomplete and lost records, it was tough to determine who was truly the wealthiest person alive in the 12th century, but signs point to the famed Genghis Khan. His empire stretched into southern Europe, which may have been more than 4 billion acres of land. The treasures, gold, and valuables he plundered while taking this land were enormous. Despite all of this, there is the legend that he lived in a tent. Conquering and humiliating his enemies, it would seem, and not necessarily garnering wealth, is what drove him. 13th century, Filippo de Amedeo de Peruzzi, worth approximately $100 billion to $200 billion. There is a case that could be made for Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai, but other sources point to the wealthiest banker in the world's wealthiest city, and that's Florence, Italy. Filippo de Amedeo de Peruzzi and his family underwrote businesses, owned ships, ran hotels, and stockpiled gold, spices, and jewelry. In fact, Peruzzi was so wealthy that monarchs and popes asked him for loans. Even when Filippo passed away in 1303, his family continued to do business, to the point that 150 years later they loaned Edward III of England money to finance the 100 Years' War. When he couldn't pay back his loan, much of the Peruzzi's wealth was lost. They were also kicked out of Florence by the victorious King of France. 14th century, Mansa Musa I, worth approximately $400 billion. The richest person in history wasn't Bill Gates or John D. Rockefeller, but rather the 14th century ruler of West Africa's Malayan Empire, covering modern-day Ghana, Timbuktu, and Mali. The vast natural resources of the region, which included salt and gold, contributed to his enormous wealth. He built numerous gold-plated mosques, and a few of these still stand today. The 14th century actually has several different people that dot the list of wealthiest people in history, including Richard FitzAlan, worth approximately $118 billion, and John of Gaunt, worth approximately $110 billion. 15th century, Jakob Fugger, worth approximately $60 to $275 billion. Fugger was another bankman who loaned money to Charles V to ensure that he got elected as the Holy Roman Emperor. In turn, Charles V gave Fugger the right to mint his own money. Yes, he was so rich he could literally make money. The reason the exact value is so wide in its range is due to the unknown value of the vast properties and merchant fleets that he owned. Either way, he was known to many as Jakob the Rich, which probably tells you all you needed to know. The 16th century, Suleiman the Magnificent, worth unknown. As ruler of the great and vast Ottoman Empire, Suleiman's wealth could be measured in power, land, gold, jewels, and apparently giant hats. But some measured his wealth in the number of women in his harem, which was rumored to go beyond 2,000. Suleiman was the longest reigning monarch of the Ottoman Empire, which was at its height during his rule. By many accounts, he was also a big fan of social reform and protected his subjects by enacting anti-discrimination laws that prevented unfair treatment based on bloodlines. 17th century, Aurangzeb, worth rumored approximately to be about $19 billion. He became ruler of India when he won the War of Succession over his three brothers and threw his father in jail, though supposedly he did not mistreat him beyond that. It was said that he made about $38 million in tribute, so over the 49 years of his reign, that is about $19 billion today, give or take. In other words, he was worth about 10 times the amount of his European contemporary, Louis XIV of France. 18th century, Stephen Girard, worth approximately $105 billion. This was a tough century because several Mughals amassed their wealth in the 18th century, but continued to accumulate it into the 19th. The French-born naturalized American, who personally underwrote and saved America from financial collapse during the War of 1812, seems as good of a choice as any. He owned many ships and banks, making him responsible for most of the trade that came into the major ports of late 18th century America. Considered the fourth richest American ever, he had no children and left much of his money to his adopted hometown of Philadelphia. 19th century. The Rothschild family, worth approximately $350 billion. As a family of London-based bankers, this fortune cannot be attributed to one person, though Nathan Meyer was the wealthiest of the four original brothers. It all began with them helping to finance the Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815, which led to their first billion. From that point on, they combined likely amassed the largest private fortune in modern history. The dynasty continues to this day in Europe with valuable real estate and energy investments, with some economists believing the Rothschild family wealth actually totals over $1 trillion combined. 20th century. John D. Rockefeller, worth approximately $340 billion. As the 19th century turned into the 20th century, the greatest commodity in the world wasn't land or people or harems, but oil. And J.D. Rockefeller was an oil man who reaped the rewards of it. He is generally considered to have been around the third richest man ever when normalizing for inflation. As the head of Standard Oil, there was a point where he oversaw 90% of the world's oil production. If that wasn't enough, in 1911, when the Sherman Antitrust Act broke up Standard Oil into 34 separate companies, Rockefeller actually made an extra $900 million. All in a rich guy's day at work, apparently. 21st century. Muammar Gaddafi, worth approximately $200 billion. We are only 19 years into the century, but the richest person of the 21st century is considered to be about the 8th richest person in all of history, give or take. And it isn't Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, or Warren Buffett. Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi ruled over an oil-rich country for 34 years before being ousted and then killed. Upon his death, much to the surprise of many, billions upon billions of dollars were found in various accounts of his across the globe. In the few years since his death, nearly $200 billion has been found in secret bank accounts, real estate holdings, and other investments. No matter whether he acquired it legally or not, money is money, and Gaddafi secretly had the most of any known person so far this century. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, smash that thumbs up button below and don't forget to subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, I've got another channel called Biographics where we do 20-minute deep dives into notable people from history. If you enjoyed this video about history's richest people, I think you'll really enjoy the content we make on that channel. So please do check it out. And as always, thank you for watching.